This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver in conversation with J.R. Ross. He's editor of WizPolitics.com. Hi, J.R.
How's it going today?
It is good. Okay, so of course the state Supreme Court race is 1 week away. It's happening during Republican President Donald Trump's second term, his embrace of Elon Musk and Doge, and a right-wing agenda, which at the same time has arguably not inspired much sort of nationally driven Democratic pushback. So I guess I'm wondering, JR, can the Wisconsin Supreme Court election on April 1st be looked at as a referendum on these national developments or not really?
Partly yes, and definitely kind of a referendum on Elon Musk in an odd way. I mean, look, every race that I've covered in an off year like this one, there's some outside force that impacts it, whether it's the economy, who's in the White House. It's unique, though, to have Elon Musk to be such a person like him, to be such a central figure. I mean, he's not an elected official, though he's kind of an aide to Donald Trump, right, leading this Doge effort. But here's a person who inspires a visceral reaction from Democrats when you look at the polling, isn't really popular with independents, and he is spending north of $15 million, at least through his PACs, to help Brad Schimmel. His fingerprints are all over this race, and part of it on both sides is clear why. For Susan Crawford, they're trying to harness this energy among the Democratic base and get them to turn out, right? There's obviously some anger among Democrats, the base, that the party isn't doing enough nationally to push back against Trump. They allowed that continuing resolution to pass a little while ago to keep the government open rather than taking a stand against it. Like, they're angry. They want something to react to. Can Susan Crawford get them to channel that anger into votes for her come April 1st? Big question. 2, Donald Trump supporters have only proven so far they'll turn out when Donald Trump's on the ballot. If Republicans, though, can find a way to harness those folks and get them to turn out in an off-year election like the Supreme Court race, that could be the holy grail for them of a coalition in Wisconsin. So you're seeing Musk's group go out and target Trump voters, like these people who only turn out in November when every 4 years when Trump's on the ballot. Will they turn out? Can he change the electorate from a normal spring electorate to what looks like November of 2024? Huge question for Brad Schimmel.
Axios reported Friday that Musk's super PAC will pay Wisconsin voters $100 to sign a petition expressing their opposition to, quote, activist judges. As the Journal Sentinel writes, both Musk and President Donald Trump have complained about federal judges, either blocking or delaying their efforts to slash and reform the federal government. What are the legal and political implications of this? How's it affecting the race?
Good question. He did something similar in the November election. There are people complained about it, but nobody stopped it. Look, if you look at the petition, the bigger thing from my takeaways that I've heard of from looking at this is that when you sign the petition, you turn over your name, email address, your home address, basically information that a group would need to target you to turn you out for election. The offer is good through 11:59 p.m. on April 1st, the day of the election. They're looking for conservatives to try and turn them out. Like, this is all part of the ground game of the turnout operation. Elon Musk is targeting those sympathetic voters, the conservative/Trump cause, and trying to get them out for Brad Schimmel. That's kind of what's going on here.
Is it arguably an improper inducement? And if so, can anyone step in before the quote unquote damage or benefits, depending on which side you're looking at it, is done?
My standard line is I'm not an attorney, and I don't play one on TV, so I can't tell you for sure if it's legal. I know people have complained about it. They've challenged it in other courts, in other states, something similar in Pennsylvania. A judge declined to block it. It was a similar setup. Sign a petition, get $100. Also, they do like a random draw. They did a drawing, quote unquote drawing for $1 million a day. Turned out that actually wasn't a random drawing. They were picking people they thought were suitable spokespeople for the PAC to award this money to, et cetera, et cetera. So my point is, it wasn't stopped by somebody else. Could it be stopped here? Possibly. You need a court to step in. We're in the waning days of the election. I'm not sure if there's enough time. Maybe somebody will, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are many issues at play in this race. There's abortion, collective bargaining, redistricting, the powers of the governor and attorney general. Brad Schimmel is, of course, the GOP-backed candidate in the race. He actually didn't sign on to lawsuits suing drug companies over the opioid epidemic when he was Attorney General. What role is this playing in the race?
Kind of not a huge one. You've seen a little bit of some knocks against Schimmel over that. The whole thing was there were these multiple lawsuits against opioid manufacturers, the opioid industry in general over that crisis. Schimmel declined to sign on to a lawsuit. He received a donation from people in the industry. As an issue in his 2018 reelection bid that he lost to Josh Kaul. It hasn't really been a big issue, though, in this race in terms of the ads that we're seeing. The ads have been focused on public safety, abortion, issues like that. Now we're seeing the first ad from Schimmel about transgender issues. But really, it's been a crime-driven messaging in a lot of ways. And what's interesting about that is that Schimmel has focused on the sentences Crawford has handed out, especially with child sex offenders. That is a weakness for her, they believe, and they are gaining traction with voters on that. Crawford has pushed back and portrayed Schimmel as soft on crime as well, giving deals to, for example, a man whose attorney gave his campaign a donation, who'd been caught with child porn. She's kind of muddied the water a bit on the public safety issue. The people I talk to think Schimmel still has an advantage there, but not necessarily an overwhelming one. Abortion, another big issue. People feel like that's a problem for Schimmel. Now we're seeing, again, the first ad that I saw end of last week about transgender stuff from a candidate, from Schimmel. That was an issue in the fall election. Is that going to be a big driver for people come April 1st? We'll see. What I've been told by folks is that that issue really is a base driver, really excites the conservative base. This is going to be a base-on-base election. What I mean by that is getting the core Democrats, core Republicans, people who are self-identified, they turn out almost all the time, getting them motivated and turning out, that's your key. The casual voter who comes out every 4 years for presidential election, not really your target audience. You're trying to get those people who are part of your base. This is an issue that excites that conservative base. Now, polling's also shown it turns off some people in the middle. Is it a driver for them? I'm not sure. But it's interesting to see that now is seeping into the messaging we're seeing in this race. Again, as we try and see, can the two sides turn out their bases for an April 1st election?
And of course, millions have been spent in this race on both sides, from inside and outside of Wisconsin. It's the most expensive judicial race in our nation's history, breaking the record of our state's 2023 state Supreme Court election. But I have a question. Until the 2015 rewrite of our campaign finance law, billionaires could only have spent $10,000 to try to influence the outcome of this race. Can you explain how the change is affecting this race?
So what happened was there were a series of court decisions years ago that made Swiss cheese of Wisconsin's campaign finance laws. One of those laws limited donors in general to $10,000 per year to everybody, candidates, political parties, the whole nine yards. There was never a cap on donations to political parties. However, because of that limit on donations in general, it acted as a de facto cap for what you'd give to political parties, right? What happened was in 2015, Republicans rewrote campaign finance laws because they basically were a shamble after the court decisions and had all kinds of issues. And they wrote them to allow unlimited transfer or unlimited contributions to the parties, but also add unlimited transfers to political candidates. That's where you've seen, George Soros and J.B. Pritzker and folks like that give big donations to the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, and then the party has transferred money to Susan Crawford. Likewise, on the Republican side, Diane Hendricks, Liz and Dick Uihlein, all business people, they've made big donations to the Republican Party, who's then transferred money to Schimmel. Why that's important is it has allowed Susan Crawford in particular to put up now some $23 million on TV, according to Ad Impact, which is a service that tracks advertising. That is unusual for a candidate, to say the least, in a 3-month race, essentially. That is not happening by raising $20,000 a pop, the maximum donation from a donor. That is because of these big donations that go to the party and to the candidate. That's a big advantage for her because the Republicans don't do that as frequently. They do it a little bit, and Schimmel's around $9-10 million on TV. They select their outside groups more for TV ads. The thing is, keep in mind, though, is all this spending going on, candidates get a better rate on TV ads, broadcast ads, than groups do. So when the money flows through Crawford, she can have more ads or a higher volume of ads for less money than the other side. So if I look at what's being spent, there's an advantage for Schimmel right now in terms of overall spending. But in terms of those gross ratings points, those frequency, those ads being shown, Crawford has an advantage the final 2 weeks because of how it's being spent. That's an example of how the money is, how things have changed in the last 10 years on that rewrite of campaign finance laws. Now, the outside spending, other outside spending, that would have been impacted by that law. That would still, you'd still see your outside groups doing stuff. It's really the big change is how that money flows from donor to political party to candidate. That has changed dramatically compared to 10 years ago.
You're tuned into Capital Notes. I'm WUWM's Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WizPolitics.com. So on that note, on March 12th, you tweeted that looking at the gross ratings points on broadcast TV, Crawford had the edge, the advantage of most of the TV money being spent by her campaign rather than independent groups. Is that what you were just referring to, and is this still the case?
Yeah, to put her spending in perspective, okay, Eric Hovde ran for the U.S. Senate for about 8 months. He spent $25 million over an 8-month period. She's around 23 from basically end of January through April 1st. It is an amazing the amount of money being spent in such a short window on TV. And there's different rules. Federal candidates can't do the same thing that state ones do in Wisconsin with those unlimited transfers from a party. So, Hovde was raising his money. Now, there are other things that he did to run his ads in conjunction with national groups, but it illustrates just how impactful this change has been. And again, she's getting a better bang for her buck that she's putting on the air compared to like the WMC Issues Mobilization Council, like an arm of Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, or Elon Musk's PAC that's running TV ads, or Republican State Leadership Committee, its Fair Courts Initiative. Those groups all get they pay more per gross rating point than Crawford does.
And what have you seen of like the correlation or the influence of all these ads on whoever ends up winning a race? Is it always tied together that who's ever spending more, whoever has more ads wins the race, or not even necessarily?
Not necessarily. It's not always the case. I can just point to Donald Trump in 2016. He was vastly outspent in that campaign and still won, right? So it's not always the key. There are things like environment, motivation, turnout operations. Those are all key things. What we're watching for in particular is, will this electorate in April look like the same one in 2023, that spring race, or will it look like November of 24? Looks like spring of 23, that's good for Susan Crawford. Remember Janet Protasewicz, they felt Liberal won by about 11 points in that race, right? The spring electorate has become more Democratic over the years. Those high propensity voters, especially the suburbs, college-educated voters, used to be Republicans, have turned more Democratic. Your more casual voter, they become more Republican. They don't turn out in the spring necessarily. So people tell me your baseline for a spring election right now is probably plus 4 or 5 Dem in a typical year. However, can Brad Schimmel and the conservative groups get those Trump voters out, those casual voters, and make it look more like a November 24 electorate? That is why you're seeing all these groups associated with Elon Musk and conservative groups going out and targeting Trump voters. If they can turn those folks out, they can maybe level the playing field and give Schimmel a better path to victory than running in a plus 4 or 5 Dem environment.
And you were talking about just the incessant barrage of ads about, sentencing issues or criminal justice issues or law and order issues. I was wondering if there's anything related to the message or image of the candidate that they significantly have to work on right now at this stage in the race that you're seeing?
Well, I haven't seen good polling in a couple of weeks. I will bet you that both of them have very high negatives, and that's a challenge for them because people get turned off by these things in some ways. It's still a motivator for them, but I don't know if they care for the candidate right now. So who can survive the barrage of attacks and who gets their base to turn out? I mean, it's kind of cliche in politics. That's all about turnout. And that's the key in every election. Who's going to turn out? You get your voter out there. The higher turnout is, the better it's going to be for Schimmel because the more casual voters you bring in. but it also has to be the right kind of voter for him. If we have high turnout for a spring race, but it's mostly Democrats coming out, doesn't help Schimmel. He's got to get those casual voters, those conservatives, those Trump voters. If he can get those guys out, that helps him a great deal.
Thanks so much for weighing in, JR, and thanks for all this information and for joining me on Capital Notes.
Anytime.
That was J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for our segment every other Monday with an extended segment on Lake Effect, and check out the Capital Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.